In North Korea today, a wife can be legally required to watch her husband's execution and forbidden from shedding a single tear. Soon-hee stood in that square for 22 years of marriage, a state security agent beside her, reading her face. That day, she understood her daughter was next. What she did in the weeks that followed and the freezing river she crossed at 2 in the morning is what this channel exists to tell you. Join us in standing up for human rights. Subscribe to hear more stories of freedom and hit the notification bell so you never miss one. Now, let's begin. My name is Soon-hee. Today I live in a small apartment in Gyeonggi Province, South Korea, just my daughter and me. But not long ago I was a citizen of Pyongyang. For 22 years I taught elementary school math in Munhung-dong, Daedonggang district, a 5th-floor apartment with a view of the Daedong River. Those of you who know North Korea understand what Pyongyang means. Not just anyone can live there. Your family background has to be clean, your loyalty to the party unquestioned, your usefulness proven. Living in Pyongyang was something I was proud of. I believed the party had chosen me. My husband, Kim Cheol-soo, was a senior official in the Korean Workers' Party propaganda department. The irony isn't lost on me now. He spent his career spreading Kim Jong-un's words to the people. We were better off than most Pyongyang families. State rations had long since dried up for ordinary citizens, but his position got us a small special allotment, maybe a sack of rice, a few kilos of cornmeal. That was a month's worth of living. And in those days, we were grateful for it. Every school day started the same way. 7 in the morning, the entire staff gathered in the auditorium, facing portraits of Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, and Kim Jong-un. We pledge absolute loyalty to the great leader, Marshal Kim Jong-un. I meant those words, every one of them. I had no doubt. This was what I'd been taught. This was how I'd always lived. You probably remember a time when you did what the adults said and never questioned it because it just seemed right. That was me. My daughter Yoon-byul was 14 then, a strong student. Her teacher said she might have a shot at Kim Il-sung University someday. That meant everything to me. Every parent knows that feeling hearing your child is going somewhere, and suddenly the whole world feels lighter. That was me. Around that time, something strange happened. A teacher named Park lived in the building next to ours, a Korean language teacher at my school. One day she simply stopped showing up. At first I assumed she was sick, but weeks passed. No word. If you asked around, people looked away and said they didn't know. I found out later she'd been taken by state security. Nobody knew the charges. Or if they did, they weren't saying. I tried not to think about it. Fear is a powerful thing. In Pyongyang, looking away was how you survived. A crack had formed. I pressed my eyes shut and pretended it wasn't there. What I didn't know was that crack would eventually swallow everything. Spring 2021, North Korea sealed its borders under the pretense of COVID-19 prevention. Trade with China collapsed overnight. Market prices doubled, then tripled. Rice, cornmeal, cooking oil gone or out of reach. Those of you who remember the hardships after the Korean War, scrounging through multiple neighborhoods just for a bowl of grain, Pyongyang looked like that. Even our household with its special allotment was barely holding on. I couldn't imagine what ordinary families were going through. The change showed up first in the children's faces. After more than 20 years in that classroom, I'd never seen anything like it. Sunken eyes, hollow cheeks, hands where you could count every bone. One morning, a 12-year-old boy in the front row slumped forward and didn't get up. He'd collapsed from hunger. I scooped him up and ran to the nurse's office. That was the first time I couldn't hold back my tears. That same evening, Kim Jong-un appeared on television, smiling broadly. "I will give everything for our people," he said. The applause was thunderous. I sat there watching, and all I could see was that boy's face. In a country where the leader promises to sacrifice everything for the people, how does a 12-year-old child pass out in class from hunger? The thought wouldn't leave me. Of course, I couldn't say it out loud. Walls had ears. Neighbors had ears. As the lockdown stretched on, rumors spread. People starving to death on the outskirts of Pyongyang. Bodies going uncollected in the provinces. A neighbor leaned in at the market and whispered, "Soon-hee, they're saying Hamgyong province is worse now than during the arduous march." The arduous march, a phrase that made your skin crawl. Hundreds of thousands dead in the famine of the 90s. And now it was worse than that. I stopped sleeping through the night. Days spent leading Kim Jong-un worship in the classroom. Nights lying awake, knowing the words were hollow. I finally said something to my husband carefully, quietly, that so many people seemed to be struggling. He squeezed my hand and dropped his voice to almost nothing. "Soon-hee, please, don't ever say that outside this room." There was fear in his eyes. Not mine, his. A man who worked at the core of the party. That's when I knew. Something had gone very wrong. The world I trusted was coming apart, slowly and without mercy. Autumn 2022. It was an ordinary evening. I came home from school, started dinner. My husband walked in about an hour late. His face was the color of ash. He barely touched his food, disappeared into the bedroom, then came out later and said very quietly, "Soon-hee, I need to be careful for a while." That was all. I didn't ask. I knew better than to ask. 10 days later, at well past 2 in the morning, someone pounded on our front door. 3 heavy knocks. My body locked up the instant I heard them. Anyone who has lived in North Korea knows who knocks at that hour. State security. 3 men in dark civilian clothes called my husband's name and let him out. Eun-byul woke up and ran to him crying, "Appa, Appa!" One of the agents shoved her aside. At the doorway, my husband turned back once. No words. Just a long blink. Then he was gone. The charges came later. Counter-revolutionary conduct and defamation of the supreme leader. When I heard it, something in me almost broke into a laugh or maybe a scream. Kim Cheol-soo had served the party for over 20 years. He'd spent his life producing material that glorified Kim Jong-un, and now defamation of the supreme leader. What I eventually pieced together was that he'd had a disagreement with a superior over a work matter. That was it. A difference of opinion, and people disappear for that. 2 months later, I received a notice. My husband had been publicly executed. Family members and work colleagues were required to attend. Let that settle for a moment. A wife required to watch her husband be executed, required to stand there without flinching, without crying, because any reaction could mark you as a suspect. I stood there like stone, biting the inside of my lip to keep my eyes dry. Only when I got home, buried under the blankets, did I let myself fall apart. Quietly so Eun-byul wouldn't hear. Everything changed the moment he was gone. The special allotment stopped. We were told to vacate our apartment. We moved to a rundown place on the outskirts of the city. And the agents started coming by regularly, not to question us, just to look around. Standing in the doorway, scanning the room, then leaving without a word. That silence was more suffocating than any direct threat. It said every single time you belong to us. You and your daughter. Whenever we choose. The world had collapsed. And from underneath it, I started looking for a way out. 3 months after my husband's execution, Eun-byul came home from school, threw her bag down, and locked herself in her room. When she finally came out, she said, "Mom, my teacher told me I can't go to university." I already knew it was coming. In North Korea, the family of a purged official doesn't get into good universities. Everyone knows that, but hearing it from my 16-year-old's own mouth, that was something else. What had this child done wrong? What right did they have to take her future because of what happened to her father? Around that time, the agents' visits became more frequent. One day, one of them lingered longer than usual, looking at Eun-byul. Then he said, "Your daughter's grown up quite a bit." The way he said it, anyone who'd lived in that country long enough would understand exactly what it meant. I didn't sleep that night. Those of you who have raised children, you know you can endure a lot when it's your own life at stake. But the moment your child is in danger, the fear burns away. That's what happened to me. I made the decision that night. Not on impulse, I turned it over for more than a month. I knew what happened to people caught fleeing, political prison camps, or shot on the spot. I knew all of it, and I decided anyway. Staying in Pyongyang meant Eun-byul would end up somewhere far worse than me. If one of us had to make it, it had to be her. Preparation had to be invisible. No one could know, not my mother, not a single old friend. One word to the wrong person and state security would hear it by morning. Over several months, I quietly sold off everything: pots, bowls, bedding, whatever the market would take. Then, through careful asking around, I found a broker. The fee was staggering. Everyone I'd saved, gone in one handover. The night before we left, I sat alone in front of my husband's memorial photo. "Cheol-soo," I whispered, "I'm taking Eun-byul. We're going somewhere good. I'm sorry. And thank you." The next morning, just before dawn, I took my daughter's hand and walked out the door. I told myself not to look back. I looked back once. The neighborhood. The alley. The worn-down apartment where I'd lived for more than 20 years. I knew I'd never see it again. And I never did. Spring 2023, April. The broker set our crossing date for early in the month before the snowmelt raised the Tumen River. We took a train north toward North Hamgyong Province. The entire ride, I barely breathed. State security officers were on board. Every checkpoint, my hands shook. I just looked at Eun-byul and said nothing. She already understood. This wasn't practice. When we reached the border area, the security was heavier than anything I'd imagined. Post-COVID crackdowns had added new fencing, new patrols. The broker told us defectors had been shot on sight. Whether that was true or rumor, it didn't matter. The rumor alone was enough. We moved it 2A. No moon. The broker led us through a reed field, crouching low. My knees tore open on the rocks, bleeding, but there was no sound to make. Through the reeds, I could see the river. The Tumen. Wider than I expected. The broker held up his hand. "Wait." A patrol's flashlight swept the bank. I pulled Eun-byul down flat and held her there in the dark, pressed against the cold earth. I could feel her heartbeat through her jacket. Or maybe it was mine. We waited 3 hours. 3 hours that felt like 30 years. There are things you can't describe in words, lying face down in the dark. knowing that discovery means death, and just waiting. I prayed to whatever was listening, to God, to Chiolsu. Please, just let Yunbiol survive, whatever happens to me. Finally, the signal. The broker's hand cut through the dark. Now. I grabbed Yunbiol's hand and we ran into the river. April water in the Tumen. It stopped my breath cold, waist deep. Yunbiol stumbled on the rocks and I yanked her upright. Don't let go of my hand, I breathed into her ear. Don't let go. How long it took to cross, I couldn't say. But when my feet hit Chinese soil and I looked back at the water we'd just crossed, my legs gave out completely. I just sat down in the mud. There was nothing left in them. We made it. That was my first thought on the Chinese side. But the relief didn't last. The broker brought us to a small farming village in China's Yanbian Korean Autonomous Prefecture. An ethnic Korean grandmother in her 60s took us in. The house was small, 2 rooms, rundown. But she had a hot meal waiting. White rice. When I saw it, something broke open in my chest. Can you understand crying over a bowl of white rice? That's the life I'd come from. We share the same blood, she told us. How could I turn you away? She hid us for over a month. During the day, we stayed inside. We had no documents, one look from a Chinese police officer, and we'd be sent straight back to North Korea. Sent back meant the unthinkable. So we stayed in that small room and waited. The walls had time, too much of it. I kept thinking about my mother left behind, my husband's memorial photo, the neighbors whose faces I'd never see again. Then Yunbiol fell sick. The river crossing. She'd been soaked to the bone in that freezing water, and now she burned with fever for 3 days straight. We couldn't go to a hospital. We couldn't go to a pharmacy without risking exposure. I spent each night pressing a cold cloth to her forehead, crying to myself in the dark. We'd crossed that river, survived all of that, and now she might die in a farm room in rural China without a single pill to her name. On the 5th day, the fever broke. Yunbiol opened her eyes and said, "Mom, I'm hungry." I couldn't stop crying, silently, so she wouldn't see. 6 weeks in, through the grandmother's connections, we met a South Korean missionary, a pastor in his 50s who'd spent years quietly connecting North Korean defectors to safe routes. Dangerous work. He could have faced serious consequences in China. He helped us anyway. I won't say his name here. He may still be working there. I only hope he's safe. His route went through Southeast Asia. It was the only way. You can't go directly from China to South Korea. So we packed again what little we had and said goodbye. The grandmother walked us to the door. "Go safely," she said. "Live well." I still hear that voice. Under the pastor's guidance, we crossed from southern China into Laos, then made our way to Thailand. On a map, it looks like a few inches. In reality, it was mountains, rivers, narrow jungle paths walked for hours at a stretch. Yunbiol didn't complain once. Not a single "I can't do this." I was proud of her and heartbroken at the same time. 16 years old doing this. In Bangkok, we turned ourselves into Thai immigration, the standard path for North Korean defectors hoping to reach South Korea. We spent 2 months in a detention facility. Cramped quarters, people from a dozen countries, a dozen different languages, different stories, same direction. There, for the first time in my life, I touched a smartphone. A South Korean consular officer lent it to me briefly. When Korean letters appeared on that small screen, my chest caved in. South Korean embassy staff came regularly for interviews, identity verification. I told them everything from the beginning. My husband's arrest, the execution, the river. I cried more than once. The officer listened through all of it. At the end, he said simply, "You've been through so much. You'll be going to Korea soon." I'd never heard that kind of thing in my life. Not in North Korea. Not once. 2 months later, the flight was confirmed. The night before we left, Yunbiol took my hand. "Mom," she said, "in Korea, really? Nobody's going to take us away?" I held her and said, "No one. Not anymore." Saying it, I couldn't quite believe it myself. A person who had spent her whole life being watched, careful with every word, having to think before speaking now, none of that would be necessary. The morning of the flight, I stared out the terminal window at the sky and said quietly, "Cheol-su, we're going. I'll take good care of Yunbiol." When we landed at Incheon Airport, the first thing I noticed was the air. I know that sounds strange, but it was different. The terminal was so bright it hurt my eyes. Hundreds of people moved around us and not one of them looked at me. No one was watching. For a person who'd spent her entire life feeling watched, that was the strangest thing of all. We spent 3 months at Hanwon, the government resettlement center for North Korean defectors. For the first time in my life, I used the internet. I didn't even know what to type into the search bar. I typed in North Korea. What came back was more than I could process. Articles, reports, videos, none of it would have been survivable to read back home. I sat there and understood, slowly, just how small my world had been. After Hanwon, we settled into a small apartment in Gyeonggi province. I remember the first time I walked into a neighborhood grocery store. The shelves. Rice, snacks, meat, fruit stacked floor to ceiling, more than I could take in. I stood in front of a bag of rice and couldn't move. Another customer waited behind me and I didn't even notice. A woman who'd walked between 3 different markets in Pyongyang searching for a single kilogram of rice standing in front of all of this. I couldn't tell if it was real. Eun-byul is studying for her GED now. She's made friends. She goes to a cram school. A while back, she laughed, really laughed, bent over, holding her stomach at a video a friend sent her. I watched from the kitchen doorway and then walked in and cried alone. She was laughing without fear. That was enough. There are things I miss. My mother, still in the north, she must be well past 70 now. I don't know if she's alive. The neighbors I used to make kimchi with every November. The alleys near my school. The light on the Daedong River. It wasn't all darkness. A place that holds your memories holds a piece of your heart, no matter how much it hurt you. Before I go, I want to say this directly. I came to this country and learned for the first time what it means to decide what you'll eat in the morning, to say what's on your mind, to go where you want to go. That's freedom. You're already living inside it. Please don't let it feel ordinary. And someday within my lifetime, God willing, I hope to board a train to Pyongyang. I hope to see this peninsula whole again. Every family separated by that border, every elderly man and woman who still waits, they're all hoping for the same thing. I, Soon-hee, will keep living here toward that day. This is where Soon-hee's story ends. She lost her husband. She took her daughter's hand in the dark. She walked into a freezing river at 3 in the morning. What she was looking for wasn't extraordinary, just a place where they could make it through one more day, safely. She still misses her mother, left behind in the north. That doesn't go away. I hope you hold your people a little closer today. If you made it to the end, leave a comment. It means more than you know. This video was created using real testimonies from North Korean defectors, adapted with AI assistants to share their stories with viewers. Characters, place names, and specific events are fictionalized and do not represent any real individual or actual incident. Thank you.